Welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal, the show where I try to make the world a little more normal one day at a time. Does it ever happen? Not really, but we keep trying, and that's all that matters. And of course, I have a guest to try to make the world more normal with me. And that guest today is Nancy Weber, psychic detective and author, and much, much more, but we're going to get into all that in a little bit. First things first, though. How you doing tonight, Nancy?
I am doing wonderfully well. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. As I told you before we started rolling, I've never had someone who worked with the cops actually on my show, so that to me is an added bonus, along with everything else that I've seen that you've done. It's all stuff I love to talk about. So
Good. And that is my badge, by the way, on the cover. Just so
oh,
you know, it's my
really?
little badge. It's an honorary one.
Well, still a badge is a badge.
Oh, yeah, it was for work done, so I'm proud of it.
But the first question I ask everybody on the show is, what got you into the paranormal spiritual world?
Hmm. I didn't always actually in it. Uh, I remember pre-birth. I remember my birth. It was an unusual birth. I didn't know it. I remembered it. I found out when I told my mother. She said, "How did you know?" So I guess I was always into it, and what we call psychic. I've always been that my whole life, and
Nice.
I never named it. Not until many years later. I thought this is the way I am, and this is the way maybe everybody is. You don't know as a child that it's any different other than the reaction. So the reaction was, don't open your mouth again, Nancy, you'll be in trouble.
Yeah, I am not I am not a fan personally of that old school way of thinking that it was for so many years, where people who had abilities were just basically told keep quiet or they're going to think you're weird. I hate that.
Imaginary friends when you're kids. Mine was a real imaginary friend. He turned out to be a very good guide.
So you can remember your birth and pre-birth though. That is, I have yet to hear that in over 100 episodes of this show.
Really? Well, it started with when I was about 21. I had a sudden recall of why I get anxious when I am not early for things, not just on time. And all of a sudden, I could feel myself pushing a very hard wall, like a bone would be, and
Yes.
breaking it and rushing out. And I realized that had to be something. And so I called my mother and told her, and she said, "How did you know I had a bone over my foot?" And so it was written up in medical texts because my sister was born before me, but I didn't know all the circumstances. She was born with a crushed collarbone, a
Oh.
shoulder, etc., because of the bone. But I broke it. I rushed to get out. I backed up and went out. I went. So I remember that. But I also started singing songs from the 1930s, and I was born in 1944. So my parents asked me how I knew these songs. I said, I used to listen while you were dancing. How did you know we were dancing?
Uh, that's mind blowing. That's mind blowing. Now that kind of recollection, Monty.
Uh, Pieces of it, not a lot. Pieces,
Still, I mean,
just little pieces, but I think they were strong for me. I love the music.
yeah. I mean, well, music is a big thing for people to recall things with. It's a good information source like that sticks with us. Like
Yeah.
I could hear a song, remember like the movie I watched when I first heard the song, or where I was when I first heard the song. So
Oh, you connect it all. I don't
yeah,
always, I'm not always able to connect it all. I remember, what was that movie I saw it in? Thank God for my phone. I can look up anything.
I mean, I'm not saying that I can remember it like that second. Sometimes it takes me half a day of thinking about it. Then I'm like, oh yeah, but I mean, it's not always an instant recall type thing here.
It's just not one of my strong suits, for sure.
Uh, I I have the weirdest ability my whole life to be able to remember the most non-important details of events, and everybody else in my family will be like, how do you remember that? It wasn't even like a big day or anything. I'm like, I just do. Like, I could remember movies that came out in the 2000s and who I saw it with, like, and 20 years later. And like, I haven't talked to those people in some of them in like 15, 20 years. And I still remember like going to the movies with them. So just because I remember the movie.
You sound just like my daughter and my son. They can remember all that, and I'm looking at them and I said, was I there? So we all have our story, and they play trivia a lot.
So,
Aw, baby.
yeah, she's not happy she's in her cage, but she'll get over it in a minute, hopefully. Munchie, munchie, munchie. Good thing you're the mascot for this podcast, otherwise you'd be fired. Just saying. But so you say you have a spirit guide.
Well, no, I don't say I have. I had a being, male, by my crib who taught me things. When I was curious and I saw things I didn't understand, I believed the man told me what they were. Like at age 2, I was standing in my soon to be bed, but it was crib. I think they either converted, I don't know. And my mother was talking. I could see them in the open door to a woman. And I saw something in the woman's belly. And so the man told me that was a baby. And I waddled out and I pointed to her belly and I said, baby. And the woman said, how do you know? She turned to my mother and said, how does she know? I just found out from the doctor. My husband doesn't even know. And my mother's answer was, shut up and go to your room. And so that man, I wasn't upset at that. I just didn't know why she was angry. But that being would come to me as I woke up, come to me sometimes during the day. And at about age 13, it stopped. And at age 31, I saw it again. I call it because I don't know, you know, what I encounter and what I see. I don't have absolute proof on, is it a great imagination on my part? And if so, then how do I get all the stuff he tells me? I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't have to know. I can be curious and wonder, but I don't
Of
have.
course. And in the paranormal world, that's all we ever can do is wonder and speculate. Basically, we can't know for certain about a lot of things. But I will. Was there any? Did your parents ever talk? Ever talk? Big yawn, girl. Big yawn. God.
Part of everything.
Yeah. Did your parents ever say later that the house was haunted, possibly, or like that no?
No, my mother was terrified of all of it. So she would never open her mouth about it. My father never talked about it. My mother was so angry when I became a known psychic, rather than my nursing career, left it, that when I visited them, a woman came out and said, oh, I saw you in the newspaper in 1970 something. And my mother went, go in the house. Like I was 2. She didn't want anybody to know or even mention what I do. It would terrify her.
And the well, not funny thing. The sad thing is, I hear that so often that parents in that generation just shut it all down. They didn't want people knowing like that their sons or daughters picked this career as a way to do things. They get
Anybody who did, actually.
oh yeah.
Over a year. Well, my parents and I were I became a psychic at age 31. I already had my second child, and we didn't see each other except once a year. My parents, they lived West Coast, I lived East. And traveling was tougher at that time. But we didn't have a great relationship anyhow. So that was okay. I met a lot of people of their generation who opened my eyes about what I'm doing. So I always think that there's always been people curious worldwide, you know. I work worldwide, so depending on the culture, there are some who I don't care how many generations, they've always honored it. They have great respect for it. It's I think it just depends on the culture within that group. You know, my mom was
Interesting.
very psychic. She saved her mother's life, but she hated having something happen she could not control.
Makes sense. I mean, oh, it makes sense knowing that generation and their beliefs. Like nowadays, it nowadays it's a way more openly accepted thing, and it's
Yep.
just the way it goes nowadays. That like people understand it. I mean, back then, psychics were something you saw at a carnival, maybe, or like
Didn't even know
when.
the word.
Oh, really?
I no, I knew nobody at
Mm.
all who called it anything. And when I started, it was because I had done so well at running a psychiatric unit that we made medical history because we didn't have to give drugs to very, very acute psychotics. I could get them to open up in minutes sometimes. And so we made miracles and they without meds. And but I didn't know what, I knew it was something worthwhile, not psychic. I understood through my nursing career it was very worthwhile to be able to have that kind of, um, I didn't know what to call it,
Mm.
extras, whatever. But I never met anyone who could talk to me about it until I started working in it. And people just flocked to me. I didn't know. And a psychiatrist, two different psychiatrists, Connecticut, New York, and I was living in upstate New York. Each one came as a client from friends of theirs and stayed friends with me and then stayed and hired me to look at all their clients one day a week. And so I did. I gave readings at psychiatrists for years. Um, it wasn't until somebody told me that there were a group of psychics for a festival. I said, "What? There are people doing this?" I had no clue. And when I went, some of them were complaining they didn't have full time and they had to work and do part time. This is in the 70s. And I was just thrilled to be with others, but they wanted to know why I was so quiet and didn't comment about how terrible it is to have to do a regular job. I said, "Well, I don't do a regular job. I left nursing and I have a full time career. I have more work than I could ever handle." And
Exactly.
yeah, so that's when I started to know what it was.
All right. A little more understanding there. What what motivated you to change careers all of a sudden? Like, because I mean, nursing's one of those careers that you do it long enough and you're going to be retiring pretty decently someday. But
Mhm. Um, I was, I graduated and was a nurse right before my 19th birthday. And I did a lot of different work. I did cancer research when I started, and I worked in all places. At age 25, I married, and in the first page of my book, The Life of a Psychic Detective, tells you why I left. My first husband had a fellowship in neurophysiology research, only it wasn't quite what he expected. So he came to me when I was 5 months pregnant and tried to kill me. And so I was left with a permanent disability. And then 3 years later, and that was the second massive injury I had at 19 as a nurse, a 300-pound patient fling herself onto me and threw me down. So I spent 11 months out of 24 in a hospital bed. So I had a history of disabilities that kept me moving away from lifting people. I couldn't. I wore a body brace. And then when they finally created a machine that can go three-dimensional, they saw that I was born with a rare deformity in the spine for a normal sized person, but common in dwarves, which means there's a genetic history somewhere in my ancestry of dwarves. And it makes a very unstable spine. So the injuries just went far worse. So I had to leave, and I didn't go to create another career. I was married to another man at that point, and I was pregnant, and his work collapsed in the industry, and he sat on a couch for a year. And out of thin air, I started earning money, not planning it at all. Not at all. I bake zucchini breads. And one of my friends says, "Hey, can you make 10? Here's $10. Can you go make me 10 for a party?" I'm looking, huh? You embroidered your work shirt? I love it. Can you do one for me? Can you do six for me? That's how I grew my business.
Interesting. Interesting. I mean, it's
Know what I was doing. I knew I had food on the table.
yeah. I mean, you did what you had to do, and fate kind of provides you a way to do it in a way. I mean,
Believed. It's not I wouldn't even say I was never particularly religious, although I am a minister. It's more kind of universal. Uh, I never cared about anything other than everything's connected. But I did believe that if I focus with my intention, there's nothing to worry about. You just do your best.
exactly, exactly. And I mean, and obviously following your gut and doing what you think you need to do ended up working out for you. I mean, obviously, because you are where you are now with multiple books written about your life and things you've done. So apparently, it all worked out in the end. But how'd you start working with the police? That's what I'm kind of curious about.
I moved to, in August 79 of last century, I moved to Bud Lake, New Jersey from Peekskill, New York.
Oh, Peekskill?
Yeah,
I grew up in Kingston, New York.
I,
I know. Yeah, I'll say I know where that is.
I lived in Croton on Hudson before that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Uh, Anyhow, I signed my son up for karate, and he left. Can you hear me? Okay. So in Bud Lake, uh, somebody knew that I was working with animals, rescuing them and communicating with them. I don't know how it got started, but they did a story on me. And so when I took my son to karate school, his teacher took me aside at the end. And she said, "Hey, have you ever worked with the police?" I said, "Why?" I hadn't, but I wasn't telling her. I wanted to know, "Why are you asking me?" She said, "Well, we had a rape." And before the words come out further, I said, "Redhead, freckles, picked up a stone to the woman's head." She said, "Would you mind talking to my chief of detectives?" I'm a, that's the first time I knew she was a police officer. And I said, "Yeah, sure," thinking nothing of it. And that's what started my career. Uh, the, he brought his partner after I met him once to my home and in my office, and he said, "We have a problem with what you just said, your description." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, two men are suspects, and they both answer that same description. And Jeremy, I did something I've never done. Everything is whatever, right?" And so I just stood up and limped strongly across the room to them, about 10 feet, and limped back and sat down. And I said, "That's who it is." And they said, "How did you know one has a limp?" I said, "It's easy. I became him." And so they went back, told him they had an eyewitness, and he fully confessed.
Huh.
It was a rape murder.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, these things happen, but I can't explain how I do things necessarily. I can examine them.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's all you can do, and I mean it kind of makes me think of the Dead Zone almost, like the Stephen King novel turned into a movie with Christopher Walken. Like it kind of makes me think of that in a way. I mean, because that's kind of what Stephen King wrote the book about is a man who can well a little different because in his book a man comes back from the dead and when he touches people's hands or any part of their body he can see like images of what memories like so.
But that's the point that has been proven in other ways. Many, many, many years ago, maybe 50, 60 years ago, there was a study of a blind woman in Russia. And then I had a student of mine who was blind who did exactly the same thing. She can touch you and tell you the color you are wearing. completely and totally blind. And we now know the fingers can relay the information. She knew the guy sitting next to her in my class had just played golf. She had visions inside because we have a third eye, literally. It's got optical receptors and rods and cones, that pineal gland. So um, it's been done a long time. And so even, Stephen is using it as a way to weave a story, but the truth is there are so many people who are so empathic and so highly sensitive that you can feel the other person's it's healthy where it isn't, where something is going on with them. You know, you can walk in the room and go, "Oh, I
Interesting.
shouldn't be there." Well, why? I think there's this ability. Everybody has some level of it.
Yeah, it's it's crazy. I mean, what kind of cases did you work mainly? Was it all like homicide, or was there other stuff you worked on as well?
Yep, to both. I've done the normal homicide, serial killer, rapes, burglaries, but I also did others I'm not allowed to talk about ever. And the only cases I ever talk about are totally adjudicated because I like being safe.
Of course.
So uh, in the book I wrote on the detective and all nature speaks on animals, I thread some of the animal crime cases in with the nice stuff in the animal one, but the life of psychic detective is basically mostly the homicides with the detectives I worked with back then, because those are all adjudicated. I'm still active 40 years.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure the police need you now more than ever with everything that's going on in the world.
Well, it depends. I think what I have learned, a lot of agencies actually are very good at what they do. It just takes a while to collect everything. So I get called in for if they have too many leads and don't know how many paths they can go down, or no leads at all, they're hoping I can pick out. Same as anybody else who works with the police as a profiler or a psychic consultant. Um, it's in the code to hire any tool, including psychics. So, but that's not my work. That's just
Yeah.
something I can do. I have done the work occasionally um, throughout the country and throughout a few other countries. My main work is what we'll call the spiritual journey, mentoring people on their abilities, their gifts, that kind of thing, workshop classes and readings. And I do less readings than I've ever done simply because I need to help people learn to do their own thing, be strong. Everybody's got gifts. You got to grow them.
I've I've been told that, and it's weird because a lot of times it doesn't happen much anymore. But when I first started this show and I would talk to psychics and mediums, to special like mainly psychics and mediums, I
Mhm.
would get like a tingling in my head, and I never knew why. Like the whole show I was talking to them, it'd be like a little tingling in the center of my head, and I have no idea why. And like some of them have said that's a gift you have, and it just needs to be unlocked. And it's talking to me is kind of like the guest would say talking to me is kind of like trying to open it, but you need to do more work on it and actually like work on yourself to get it open. Like it's not it's going to happen naturally.
All the tingling, think of it as we are all, nothing is stagnant, right? All the molecules are always moving, et cetera, and our frequencies, we have multiple frequencies. Our skeletal system has a different frequency than our eyes. The earth has a frequency. Everything has that frequency. So we call it resonance when everything is kind of in harmony. And that tingling is also resonating with what they're saying and going, yeah, but that's not your conscious mind. That's your subconscious saying, yeah, it's here. All you have to do is actually do it enough. So, one of the things I can share with you and your audience is one of the things I began to do to discover what's going on here is to write in a journal, even my conversations in my head that I had with people. And in my book, what I try to do in Life of Psychic Detective is after every chapter, based on what that demonstrated in some ways, I give you examples and exercises on how to work. Like, you ever lose keys or misplace them, or wallet or glasses, right?
Of course.
Okay. Well, I trained myself to find everything early in life. And I discovered, because in nursing they teach us we are electromagnetic activity. We measure the brain waves, we measure the heart, we measure the nerve to muscle impulses electromagnetically. EKGs, EEGs, EMGs, right? So that means we all have electromagnetic activity, and we can see, some of us can see the light wave patterns, and where they don't resonate well, like they're not in harmony with the rest of it, we know then something's off. But it's also just a feeling, you don't have to see it. So I started thinking I was a magnet, and I can pretty much find many things easy and fast. And so when I married my third husband 34 years ago, he wanted me to come to work and say hello at his place. Little did I know he was completely disorganized, big time. And the office looked like a storm hit it, and three other guys were sitting there chatting. Shelving about 30 feet long, floor to ceiling, and nothing organized, just thrown around. And my husband said, "Hey, do you think you can find 3 platinum discs I'm missing? I can't find them." And he walked out. And so I walked down the shelving. I just said, "Silver discs." I had no idea what he was talking about. And I just walked myself down as a magnet, seeing where I got pulled. And I went and put my hand where I felt pulled out. And a plastic bag had 3 silver discs. And I marched out right away. I said, "Hey, Dick, is this what you're looking for?" He goes, "Yeah." If he had told me then the value of those discs, and this is back 34 years ago, it was $12,000, I might not have been able to find them because I'd be too emotionally involved. This was just fun. So detaching from needing to do is, oddly enough, the key a lot of times to being able to do it. So if you wanted to play and you have somebody in the home with you, you stay in one room and they go hide something, and you don't know where it is, and you can just feel each room is in this room. And that it doesn't matter if you find it right away. The more you do those things, the more your brain gets that program that you really want to do this. It's intention, it's focus, and actually it's very easy. Pretty much almost every day I'm finding something after he's looked, and I know to sit back and watch him just search for things. But that's how I found 3 missing children. It was the years of doing that.
Interesting. And yeah, I saw that in your profile that you helped with missing children cases, which is phenomenal because there's nothing sadder than when a kid goes missing. There really is nothing sadder. I mean, I have a 5 and 8 year old myself, and if they went missing, I would be
Oh,
beside myself for like ever until they were found, or the
I
worst. But
still, it tugs at me. I know I can remember every single case I ever worked on with that because, oh my God, horrible. But these three were one brother, 2 sisters who were parentally abducted. And it was an incredible experience for a lot of reasons. And I think that sometimes people, see themselves like you're saying, which is why I loved when I saw The New Normal, Paranormal, The New Normal. I love the title because too many people, even any generation from to Gen Z, it doesn't matter, would say, "Oh, I can't, not me," or "That's weird." Yes, but others would say, "Gee, I'd like to do it, but you can do it. You know how." No, I didn't know how. I got curious about what's going on. Just like when I was listening to some of your podcasts and you're looking at everything in the universe and wondering, right? Well, did you want proof in some way? I can't get proof about the source and the absolute creation and how that occurred, from nothing to something or something to nothing. Blah, 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 and I go nuts. It's like Stephen, oh, can't even remember his name. He's gone. Stephen
Stephen
Hawking.
Hawking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I read, Brief History of Time, where he goes through that whole thing and then it's like brain jam. You just can't sort it all out. But in working with police, I was able to get absolute proof that something's going on. But also in journaling, if I have a conversation, if I had a conversation in my head about you, Jeremy, and I wrote it all down, and then I called you and said, "Hey, Jeremy, uh, this is weird, but I have to ask you something. Did this, blah, 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 blah." And you go, "How do you know?" Well, that's what happened at the very beginning. I did everything that way. I wrote everything down. I took every item in my home that was not something I got from me but from friends and family that I didn't always see. I would hold them and just write down everything I felt when I was holding it. And so I would call and say, "Hey, I got a funny question. Do you have a cast on your arm? How did you know I broke my arm?" And I thought, oh, weird. So I always say now, we're wireless. That's how they got wireless computers and everything else, and ham radio operating and CBs. We are all wireless, not just we, the trees. We now know they talk to each other in their own language. They feed stumps. They give their own nutrition.
They do. It's strange because like you'll
No,
see a stump, and then like a couple years later you'll see the same stump and it's starting to grow again, and it's like,
yes,
how?
because they're being fed by all the local trees. No
Hmm.
one's arguing. We can learn from them. They don't argue about it. They don't say, "Well, you should starve because you don't have enough money, and we're going to increase the expenses in your local supermarket because you can't even drive somewhere to get it cheaper." You know, this is mentality that's crazy. But trees don't ever even consider. They just give because they were given life. If we felt the same way that animals, and I said, on the cover is a squirrel and a deer, and they're next to each other. They're my friends. They come and feed with me. I tell the squirrels, "You cannot leave peanut shells on my deck." And they look at me and they take this peanut and they go right to the edge of the deck, turn around, nod their head, and then get off.
That's incredible.
No, they understand because
I wish my dogs listened that well.
here's a thought. I learned, if you send an image to a pet, where I lived in Bud Lake, I was a block up from Route 46, which is a very busy road, and the lake is right opposite. Bud Lake was right on the other side of the road. And my cats at that time, my cats had never been anywhere like that. And they were always indoor, outdoor. So I sat down and looked at all of them, closed my eyes, and showed them speeding cars, pain, etc. They would go to the edge, never having been there before. They'd go down to the corner and never go in the road because they get the message through images and feelings, intention. Missing dogs, missing puppies. I have several stories of it because each one of those stories are about dogs in particular who taught me that they were all so different about what they were doing. I could trace one for a solid year, town to town. We could prove that he had been there, but it was always like a day after he left that town to go to another one. But he shows up 365 days later to the minute to where he first left home. And all along he said, I'm just traveling around saying hello to everybody, having a great time. And I thought, we never think that way about a dog when they leave. We're heartbroken. And some of them, yeah, but not all of them. They're a lot of the adult ones go, I'm on a new adventure.
Interesting. I mean,
Just, yeah, that's why, in All Nature Speaks, it's chapters on dogs are my teachers, horses are my teachers, cats are my teachers, dolphins are my teachers. I was scuba diving and I was snorkeling. So I had a lot of wonderful adventures with fish who were my friends. They let me pet them in the waters.
that's incredible. That's purely incredible.
I love it. So I found that a lot of it is they can read your intentions, just like, dogs can. They know who's safe and right?
Exactly. But the thing I'm wondering is, with all this you can do, how do you deal with negative people? Because in this day and age, there are so many negative Nancy's out there, so many, I can't think of the word right now, but narcissists, so many negative people. Like, there's just so many people that want to bring everybody else down because they feel down. How do you deal with that?
Very simple. Since the first cave days, I tell any of them, I talk with my friends that way. Since the first cave days, when an earthquake would happen, there would always be one person who'd be so mad that their place was hurt or destroyed, they pick up a stone and go to the next one and bang them on the head and say, I want your cave. You're not changing people's um, ways by being upset by them. I am not, and because my work has been at fresh crime scenes and all, I am not uh, soft. I'm very tough in some ways, but I also have a lot of empathy. And even if I know what made you crazy nasty and vicious, there's no excuse if you're an adult. So what you're asking is really how any of us cope with how insane, and I think truly psychotic actions, particularly like the shootings, etc.
I was going to say, yeah.
Well, it's insane. It's no matter how we see things. You know how people get embarrassed if they get caught on
Yeah.
anything. So when nuclear reactors were built first, Allied Chemical had a lot to do with it. Lou Goodman and his right-hand man, Larry Bogart. And a woman came to them with a book she wrote on on fission. And she was right. She was worried about what would happen, etc. And and they looked at it. Now, when you look at most companies who create something don't know it's bad, like Monsanto and Roundup and all the rest and others, petrochemical industry, rather than learn how to get rid of it, they put it in food, they put it in personal care products, they put it everywhere. So when these things happen, Allied Chemical did something else. Lou Goodman, Larry Bogart left, quit there. He was president of Allied Chemical, walked out, said, oh my God, what did we do? Albert Einstein. Oh my God, what did I do? So three of them formed the anti-nuke movement with this woman, Betty Hogan, I think her last name was. And I became friends with Larry, close. And then when Albert died, Dr. Ernst Sternglass, who was wonderful, he got ousted by his whole scientific community for daring to go and be anti-nuclear reactors. So what you're saying is very relevant to any time on this earth.
True. Very true.
When you look at why people do those things, I mean, I love psychology and say abnormal psych. I love it because I want to understand where it comes from. However, where it comes from is one thing, but I didn't help people break through by only understanding that. They had to break through themselves. And in today's world, you have too many, I mean, it is crowded, but you also have who rises to the top to make decisions that decide everybody's life anywhere on this earth. That's, I don't know that we're changing any of it. So what I do is very simple. I believe that if I can help any one of them, and I've helped a few who come across as, oh my God, I hope they don't influence anybody else. And I'm very careful to pick a time and a way to introduce to them some concept that they don't know and break open. And I'm very blessed with having a reputation for not lying and being very authentic and sometimes in your face. And so they hear me, and if I can prove to them some things, sometimes I've seen them change. Only you have to find a way to live with it. Anyhow, there are too many of them. You know that.
Oh, I dealt with some today, actually. Yes, so I do know that. I mean, I deal with them every day of the week. I work in sales. I work in sales, and it's just a lot of people I call. Like some of them will have great conversations with me, even if I can't sell them anything that day because it's telecom. So some days they have projects they're looking for stuff for. Some days they don't. But some of them are just so negative, like take me off your list immediately. Well, let me tell you, buddy, you're not getting off the list because no one gets off the list. We'll just call you in 3 months when you forget about us. But that's just the way it goes. But
So I have another thought for you because I handle it differently. I decide that every being I'm speaking with, I'm on the other side of it, obviously, but every being I'm speaking with is an opportunity to know another soul before I connect. And what happens is magic. I found that out years ago because I was so shy. I decided I had to do something to overcome it. So I put my ego needs aside, ego being fear, in that way aside. And I would close my eyes and imagine whoever I'm going to talk to next, I am going to find their beautiful soul. And weird things started to happen uh, without saying where this happened. But I lived near live music Thursday nights, and I loved going out dancing with my friends. And then I don't drink. I hate alcohol. It's not me. Uh, I can't. It tastes like medicine to me. So, but I can dance all night back then. So I didn't know the place. I just knew of it. And some neighbor said to me, "Oh, you don't want to go there. That is the nastiest guy who owns everything there. He's cheap. He's mean. He's this." And what I did was understand that's their judgment. They don't know that person's soul. So I closed my eyes before I went, and I said to the soul of the person I didn't meet yet, I can't wait to meet you. I am so happy that we're going to be getting to know each other, and I hope you're okay. And if I can be of service, let me know. Not only did we become friends, he became a client. He, when I performed a wedding for my daughter, he chipped in and bought all the drinks. He was so generous. And people were going, how is he generous? But I've done that with my divorce. I never paid for a divorce. The lawyers picked up the tab. 2 divorces, 2 lawyers.
my my
Friend,
mother and father would love to learn that lesson from you about 15 years ago. Just saying.
it's a soul. I mean, my YouTube channel is Soul Talk with Nancy Olin Weber for a reason. Because for me, if I think that there's something intact, not what you're showing, not the problems, but if your soul is beautiful, which I believe all souls are, whether you're a chipmunk, a bird, a tree, or a person, then I'm going to take it at that level. If you want to drop down to a lower level, that's your issue. It's going to boomerang back on you, not me. I call that karma. And I've had quite
I
happen.
I personally am a huge believer in karma. I believe karma. I believe karma works every day, especially for this dog. Especially for this dog, it won't stop barking. But I believe karma works. Like it, I've seen it work. Like I'll pay it forward. I'll do something nice for somebody, and then in a week they'll return the favor in some way I never expected. Some way I never expected at all. Like it's just insane.
Or not even from that person. It's what you give out to the universe, you get back tenfold. Right?
100%, 100% correct. But the last question I got to ask is, I like to ask this of everybody who's in the psychic world.
Sure.
How do you deal with skeptics?
I love them.
I kind of knew that was coming.
Bad. I'm a skeptic. Prove to me you really do what you claim to do about anything. Don't just tell me you do it. So closed-minded is not skeptic. Closed-minded is absolute fear. Fear of the unknown. And that's something I am gentle with, because you don't force somebody to open up who is frightened. They need to heal. They need to take care of themselves. And they can get very nasty, yes, but they're my teachers about how to help them understand why. When you email me, for instance, oh, please find Summer Wells. After all, if you were spiritual, you would. And so it was a great thing that happens for me. I think about it. I send it up to the universe. I ask for guidance. And then I go, Ricki Lake show. That's why. So when I was on Ricki Lake show once, it was all parental abductions, and I was the guest psychic. And on the panel was a guy whose baby was abducted by his ex-wife, or soon to be, and they couldn't find her. This is before computers. And Ricki said, Nancy, you look like you know something about it. And I said, well, even if I do, I'm not talking. She said, why? Live audience, right? And she said, why not? I said, because if I'm right, then she'll know not to do that. I'm not going to risk his ability to maybe have his baby back. So I have another offer. Well, what is it, Ricki said? I said, if everyone watching and everyone listening and everyone in the audience who also had abducted kids, we all say a prayer quietly to ourselves that may all these children be found safe, unharmed, and brought back to their loved one. Can we do that? And so we did. And then after the show, I told the guy, and Ricki asked to listen. I said, if you open your mouth about it to anybody, I'm going to talk about you loud and clear. You're not going to say another word. I took an oath of confidentiality on law enforcement, as a minister, as a nurse. What are you kidding? I don't tell. And so I did, and I was right. I mean, that was January or February, and Sunday on May, customs in Canada, going from Michigan to Canada, stopped her and the baby, and he was brought back that day. And the guy called me that day and said, my baby's in my arms, just like you said, and customs officer would see it, etc. If I had said it out loud, I couldn't care less if I was right or not. In that way, that's ego. That I was right, that gave him hope, and it turned out to be right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm thrilled. But it's nobody's business to even ask on social media. I run a lot of Facebook groups. I have one somebody in Denmark created called Psychic Detective Nancy Wellen Weber fan side. And it's people from all over the world. It's only a few thousand there, but I love that group because they hear me. When they start talking about finding somebody and what they see, I go, listen, do you want to be safe? Do you want your children or your family to be safe? You do not talk out loud, because if you are right and somebody here happens to be connected to whoever did it, how are you going to feel? So I have no problem with skeptics whatsoever, because a skeptic is going to ask those kind of questions thoroughly, considering everything, right? Closed-minded, I treat them gently because they're broken. That's how I feel. And yet they can open up ideas for me on how to help people understand and say, what it actually is. So, and believers, much believers, where they don't know how to question things.
Well, that's an amazing way to look at things, and I agree. I mean, and everything you said makes sense, and I 100% agree with it. I mean, why would you give information you don't need to give, especially if it's going to end up deterring what you're trying to do?
Right.
So I agree. But before we wrap up here, because I do have another interview in a few minutes,
Sure.
tell people where they can find you, where they can find your books, and just promote yourself to the fullest.
So the name is Nancy Orland Weber. And that's how I get promoted. That's my website, nancyorlandweber.com. My Soul Talk with nancyorlandweber.com is my YouTube. My Facebook sites, Nancy Orland Weber is a regular Facebook page that I think I have I try and keep it below 5,000 because I think that's a limit personal. But Psychic Detective with Nancy Orland Weber, and I don't know. On my website, you'll find mentoring, you'll find sessions and workshops and classes and blogs and music that I created and wrote with a folk singer and all kinds of things. So thank you so much, Jeremy. It's really delightful. Your questions are, I love good questions. They make me stop.
I try. And I truly do appreciate you coming on. It's been an honor to have you. And I will, of course, post all those links in my podcast notes as well. So people know where to find you. And if they, I advise people, look into her books because I want to read them. So if I want to read a book, everybody should want to read it because I am
Amazon.
a little picky. I'm a little picky when it comes to books.
So your time is precious, right?
And the time I get to read is minimal. Minimals could be with 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a full-time job and podcast career. So yeah, I have very little time to read, but when I do, I actually have a pile of books from people that have been in my show that they sent me autographed and everything. And like I've been trying to work my way through them, but I can't say I've gotten through one in the last 6 months because I just don't have the time. But
no, you have, those you are accountable and responsible for come first, besides yourself.
always,
Right?
of course.
Right.
But,
I didn't have time to read when my kids were growing.
oh God, no.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Not a problem, and I appreciate Nancy coming on as well.
Thank you.
And I of course thank all my listeners for listening, and anybody who checks out this video in replay or watches it live, thank you as well. Like and subscribe everything you see, and all my guests know where to find me. So I mean, well, all my listeners know where to find me. My guests do too, I'm sure. But I will catch you all in a few minutes because I do have a back-to-back interview tonight. Part of the problem of having your dog in the hospital for 3 days is having to move interviews around. So, but he's doing better now, everybody, for those who pay attention to my social media. So thank you for all the well wishes, and thank you to those who donated on the GoFundMe to help. It's now ended, but thank you to those who helped. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I will see you all in a minute. And to my listeners, see you in half a week. Have a good one.
Okay.